Agency Funding Bidders Conference. My name is Amy Cole Bloom. I'm the Community Services Manager with the City of Hayward. I'd like to acknowledge that due to some technical issues, the original recording of this bidders conference from October 28th is not available. So this is a re-recording of that presentation. There is no new information in this presentation. And instead of reviewing questions and answers in real time on this presentation, we have prepared a PDF that's posted to our website that captures all of the questions that were asked during the bidders conference and staff responses. All right, so this is an overview of how we'll spend our time. We'll do some introductions of staff. We'll talk about the process itself. We'll share some additional resources and staff contacts, and then we'll wrap up. So this is our team, the folks who will be supporting you. I'm the Community Services Manager. We have Carol Lee, Senior Management Analyst, Emily Huang and Rick Rivera are Management Analysts on the team as well. Evelyn Oliveira is our Senior Secretary who will provide some administrative support, and Kim Colthurst is our Program Specialist, who's the newest member of our team, and we're really excited to have her. There's also an email address there for City Data Services technical support. All of our application process happens online via citydataservices.net. This is their support email address. Please note that the domain name is different. It is support@citydataservices.com when you email them, but when you go to their website, it's .net. Okay, so I'm going to talk a little bit about the funding process itself. The funding process is highly competitive. We consistently have more requests for funding than we have funds available, and it's subject to availability. We have two main funding sources this year. The first is federal funding, Community Development Block Grant, or CDBG. The second is the general fund, which is local funding provided by City Council. There are there's three different application categories. The infrastructure and economic development category, those are projects that'll be funded through CDBG. The services category, those are things like homelessness services, legal services, education, food access, food security. Those are funded through both CDBG and the general fund. And then we have arts and music, which is funded exclusively through the general fund. There are some caps to these categories, which I'll talk about next. We do have a minimum grant request for all categories except for arts and music. So if you're applying for infrastructure, economic development, or services, you must apply for at least $10,000. That cap does not exist for arts and music. And then we also have that threshold doesn't exist for arts and music. And we also have some caps for what you can request, some maximum grant requests. For services, there is a $100,000 maximum for housing and homelessness projects, and then a $50,000 maximum for all other types of services. And this is to reflect council priorities. For arts and music, there are caps that vary based on the number of years a program has been funded, and page 3 in the RFP has more details on that. We get the question a lot about average awards or what to expect. For services, projects awards will range between about $20,000 to $45,000 on average, knowing that there's a cap that's $100K for housing and homelessness and $50K for other services. With the economic development and infrastructure projects, those will typically range between $50,000 on the low end to $100,000 depending on the activity. I am now going to turn it over to Emily to talk some more about funding eligibility.
Hi there, my name is Emily Huang. I'm the Manager Analyst with the Community Services Division. I am also the lead of the Community Agency funding process. So any initial questions, you can always reach out to me specifically, and then we can pass on your question to your specific staff lead. So I'm going to jump into the funding eligibility for this agency funding process. First and foremost, applicants must be registered as a 501c3 nonprofit. We do ask for that confirmation, or they could also be a government entity. In addition, they must have an independent fiscal audit in the last 12 months, and that's only required if you're requesting for $20,000 or more. We'll run into the fiscal audit requirements in the next slide. And also we have minimum contracting standards. So when you do get If you are awarded, we have contracting standards that at the city that you would need to be able to meet, and that can be seen into more detail on page 3 of the RFP. Another requirement for to be eligible for this funding is that you would need to make sure that you're serving low-income Hayward residents and be able to show proof of that as well. And then for CDBG applicants, they must meet a HUD national objective, which is described further in the RFP and in the application. And you'll see more details on eligibility and fiscal sponsorship on pages 1 and 4 of the RFP. And then next up, we did want to provide some awardee updates for CDBG awards. One key update is that the indirect cost rate has increased. So it moved from 10% to 15% for indirect costs or administrative costs. So you can reflect that in your award request. Another one is the Build America, Buy America Act, or BABA. And that states that all infrastructure projects requesting over $250,000 must procure materials and manufactured products produced in the United States. And then lastly, the last update here is that we also need to follow the Federal Funding Accountability and Transparency Act, or FFATA, and that requires that all agencies register for a sam.gov account and may require reporting their executive compensation data should you be awarded funds through this process. And you can read more about the details on CDBG requirements on page 5 of the RFP. So next up, we will be discussing fiscal sponsorship. This was a hot topic last year to better understand the requirements there. And so this slide focuses on the two different buckets. Applications requesting below $20,000, they do not need to have a fiscal sponsor, and then we also don't require a fiscal audit as well. However, if you do want to request more than $20,000 across all projects, so say you're applying to multiple projects, one is 15,000 and another project is 15,000, and you are awarded both of those projects, you would be receiving $30,000 from the city. So you would be required a fiscal sponsorship because in total you'd be requesting for more than $20,000 from us. If that is the case, then you will be required to have an independent fiscal audit for fiscal year 23 and 24 or for calendar year 2023. And if you don't have a fiscal audit, which a lot of our agencies don't as well, you can work with a fiscal sponsor that can provide and meet that requirement. And the fiscal sponsor can apply on behalf of you in CDS, and they may utilize up to 10% of the grant for their own expenses. And you can read more details on fiscal sponsorship on pages 4 of the RFP. And I'm going to pass off to Amy again.
Great. So I want to share a little bit of information about grant payments and the reporting requirements. These are different depending on the source of funding that you receive. So speaking first about the general fund, so these are arts and music and some services category projects. The reporting requirements are semi-annual. You're required to submit a mid-year report for the first 6 months of the fiscal year, and that's due at the end of January. And then there's a year-end report for the subsequent 6 months of the fiscal year that's due in the middle of July, due to the timing of the city that we have to report the data we receive from you. The payments for general fund award recipients, those are milestone-based installment payments. So you will receive 50% of your award at the time of contract execution. 30% of the award comes when that mid-year report is completed at the end of January, and then the final 20% installment payment comes at the end of the year when that year-end report is submitted and completed. On the other side of things, CDBG, it works a little differently. There are 4 quarterly reports, so they're due at the end of the month following the prior quarter close. with the exception of the last quarter, which is due in the middle of July. The payments are on a reimbursement basis. So, on a monthly basis, recipients of CDBG funds must submit a reimbursement request or an invoice to the city, which includes all the sufficient backup documentation, receipts, so on, so that we can then reimburse your expenses from that prior month. And those reimbursement requests, again, are due monthly on the 15th of each month for the prior month's costs. Here now is the timeline for the application process. It goes more in depth in the RFP on page 2, but applications, the first big milestone for you all after this bidders conference is the due date for the applications, which is December 2nd. It's a Monday. All applications are due on via City Data Services by 5 p.m. So please don't send Word doc applications. They have to go into City Data Services to count, and we won't accept anything after that 5 p.m. cutoff. Throughout December and into January, city staff and then members of the Community Services Commission will review the applications. The CSC will score them with a rubric, and then we ask that you please save the date now for January 18th and January 25th, which is when we'll do virtual interviews. Each agency will have a time slot assigned on one of those 2 days. So we ask that you hold those dates now. They're Saturdays. You'll only have a 30-minute block of time to commit. And please make sure that you're communicating with the folks on your team so that the person who is the most knowledgeable about the program is available on that day so that they can speak to the CSC's questions and represent your agency as best as possible. In February, so the third Wednesday in February, the Community Services Commissioners will deliberate and discuss their funding recommendations, and they will vote on those recommendations in March, on the third Wednesday in March. And then in April, those recommendations will go to council for a work session in early April, and then council will hold a public hearing as required by HUD for CDBG funds at the end of April, which is where they will vote on the recommendations. And this whole process will be finalized when council adopts the budget later in the fiscal year. All right, so I'm going to go ahead and stop. I'm going to turn it back over to Emily to talk more about the application, and then we'll actually show you what the application looks like in City Data Services.
Great, thanks, Amy. So as a quick application overview, one, you can see the full application on page 6 of the RFP. I would recommend looking into that so that you can look at all of the questions all at once and kind of know what you're getting into. And then I'm just going to review really quickly how you would create a new login if you are a new agency. So you would go to citydataservices.net, and that's where you're going to do your application and put in as a user login, Hey 2025. And for the password, you do the same thing, Hey 2025, and then log in. And then there you will be able to create a new account and it will have you set up your account. So if you're an agency that is coming back and you're a returning agency, you simply just have to go to your reports tab and the application will be there and you can just create a new application. With that, I'm going to share my screen and review the application really quickly. So in the past, we haven't done this, but I think this time around we can review sort of the details and things that people typically ask us questions about. Here you'll see, this is the application and you'll find that in your reports tab and apply. And the first thing here you'll see is that you can download the PDF and simply just click here and see the entire application package. And it is also on our web page as well. Furthermore, if you scroll down to question 10, you'll see that this is asking if you are applying on behalf of another organization. So if you do have a fiscal sponsor, they would be filling out the application for you. And that this is where you would indicate if you are applying on behalf of another person. Another item I wanted to call out here is that you can click on links and it'll essentially tell you exactly what we're looking for. It'll give you some further information about the question itself. Another thing that is key as well, so you don't lose information in your application, is clicking the Save and Continue button. And you'll see that throughout the application, save and continue. And that way you won't be able to lose all of that precious information. I would recommend putting answers to your questions in a separate document so it doesn't only live on CDS in the case that it does disappear, but that save and continue should be able to save that information as you go. Another question that we did want to call out here is that question 19 will ask you whether or not you're applying for a CDBG project. And here, if you click on the link, it'll tell you a short description of CDBG. In the RFP on page 8, I believe, it reviews the different categories as well. If you have questions about what project to apply for. And from question 19, if you say yes, then the questions 20 to 24 are relevant to CDBG questions. However, if you're applying to general fund funding, you won't need to apply or answer any of these questions. So I did want to call that out because it ultimately saves you the work. So as we scroll down, you'll see we have general questions like what's your organization's mission? How long have you served in Hayward? Our Community Services Commission also likes to understand like how does your project or program align with the city's greater priorities, which you'll see in question 28. As we scroll down, you'll see we have impact. It asks you like how many units of service did you provide? And we say units of service because, not every program has the same units of service. Like how many classes did you teach? How much food did you distribute? So that would be dependent on your program that you're applying funding for. Something that's often kind of stumps people is this racial equity data table. And we did want to go through this together just so we're able to be on the same page here. So when we go into this, the city or the Community Services Commission, they value racial equity, and this is why we have this here. But also for demographics itself, that's a requirement of CDBG as well. And the way that this table is set up is that we have a table requesting your agency's demographics. So this column would be your leadership demographic, and then this column would be your total staff demographics as well. And you'll see here there's definitions. So total staff would include your leadership as well. So be sure to look into that a little more closely. When you fill out this form or this table, say, we have 3 folks who identify as white under leadership. Here you would say of the 3 people who are identify as white, how many of them identify as Hispanic? And we could say 2 out of the 3 folks would identify as Hispanic. And that's why this Hispanic column is here as well. And that would be the same case for any other race as well. So say you have someone who identifies as Black and white, biracial. So they would put like, say we have 2 people, and then of those folks, how many of those folks identify as Hispanic? Am I missing anything there, Amy? Okay.
No, I think you've covered it.
Okay, great. Here you'll see we also ask for the gender demographics of your agency and all the total employees, which includes leadership. And then here you'll also see the prior demographics information asking for data from 2023 to 2024. If your agency didn't collect racial demographic data of those that you served last year, say you're a new program or you're new to applying for city funding, that is okay. However, if you have other ways of documenting demographics information, that's something that you can upload later down the line on this application, and I can show you how to do that as well. So as we scroll down, we also have a section on a budget and requesting a budget breakdown of your agency's program and the revenue sources that are coming from your program. So questions 38 and 39 pull directly from this budget table down here. And you'll see, for example, what is your total cost of the program budget or the project? And here it says it's 1,123. So if we go down here, this total expenditures is 1,123 of the total program budget. And then we have the question 29 that asks, how much are you requesting from the city of Hayward? And here it says 1,000. And right here, you'll see this is the city of Hayward request column, and it goes all the way down, and you'll see it's 1,000. So when you go into this budget, it asks you, this first section asks you for revenue sources. And the CSC likes to know, like, what other revenue sources do you have? Is the city of Hayward the only source of revenue that that is funding your program? They like to know that should we ultimately not have the funding for the program in the future, how likely are the services going to continue? So if you have multiple sources of revenue, for example, different types of grants, you would include them here. And this question asks how many lines do you need? And here you would put 6 if you had 6 different sources of revenue, or I can say 4. And then you click it and it'll bring you back to the top. And if you scroll back down, you'll see there's 4 lines for you to fill out your information. And that's for total funding of other sources. So you could say grant, another grant. And then following down here is the program budget for what you are requesting. So the other funding sources, you'll define like what are the other funding sources paying for of these different line items. And then here are on this like first column right here, that would be your program budget for what you're requesting of the city of Hayward. And it's the same idea with the lines. So if you needed to put different lines for different program staff, you would just input that here in this green box. Is there anything I'm missing there, Amy? Okay. Great. And then just to wrap up the application overview, so this section here, attachments, there are required attachments that we request is that we ask for a 2023-2024 audit. It's okay if you don't have the most updated audit, just put whatever you have most recent audit, and then you can update that later on. We ask for your agency's budget. If you have a racial equity plan, you can upload that as well. And then here is an opportunity to provide supplemental information or documents, which would include like a brief one-pager describing your program, any photos, materials that would describe your program, and be able to give that full picture to the Community Service Commission when they're reviewing your application. And the way you would do that is you'd simply click upload documents. These are the different types of attachments that it asks of you. So say you wanted to upload your brochure of your program, you would choose a file over here and then upload it once you choose it. And then you can click across the different documents that you've already uploaded. You can also do that as well. So returning to the application, the last item I did want to touch on is that we also provide interpretation services. If your agency would like an interpreter during your interview with the Community Services Commission. Typically the interviews only last around 15 minutes, but we do want to make sure that If there is a language barrier there, that we are able to address that and give you equal opportunity to be able to communicate with the commission. And with that, I'm going to pass it back to Amy to talk about the application deadline and other resources.
Great. I'm going to go ahead and share our slides one more time. All right, so for the application deadline and other resources, as a reminder, we'll say it lots of times, the application deadline is December 2nd at 5 p.m. That is a Monday. All applications should be submitted to City Data Services at www.citydataservices.net. No late applications will be considered. All application materials, including the RFP, as well as the Q&A document from this bidders conference, will be available on the city's webpage, and that will be updated continuously with any new information. And if you have questions during this process, we have staff available for technical assistance. First of all, if your questions are anything about the City Data Services platform, please email City Data Services directly for technical support. You're welcome to email the staff contact, CC the staff contact from the city, but we ask you to look directly to CDS for support if you're struggling to make an account or to set up your application or to find your application. Please reach out to support@citydataservices.com. Rick is your contact for any economic development, infrastructure, or facilities questions. Kim is taking the lead on our general fund applications. You can also include me on those emails. I'm there to support as well. And then Emily is taking the lead on CDBG public services applications. She's also our point of contact for the CAF process in general. So if you have high-level questions about the timeline or anything like that, Emily is your go-to there. We'll wrap up here with questions. Again, this is a re-recording of the original bidders conference from October 28th. We were not able to save the original recording, so we're not going to go through the Q&A at this point, but I will refer you to the city's website on community agency funding, where there is a document that has every question that was asked and the city's response. And with that, thank you for your time. We ask that if you are watching this recording for the first time and you didn't attend the original bidders conference, please reach out to staff to let us know that you've watched this recording and that we can track your attendance for our records and to make sure that we communicate with you about any changes